The following program presents principles designed to promote good health and is not intended to take the place of personalized professional care. The opinions and ideas expressed are those of the speaker. Viewers are encouraged to draw their own conclusions about the information presented.
Hello and welcome to Health for a Lifetime. I'm your host, Don McIntosh, and today we're going to talk about stress. Joining us is Dr. Skip McCarty. He's written a new seminar called Stress Beyond Coping, and this is a fascinating seminar. I've really appreciated reading through it and preparing with you for this. I've noticed something that really gripped my attention, though, and that was that stress pyramid. Tell us a little bit about that.
Don, I wanted to show the 7 keys to managing stress in a hierarchical formation based on the research that I've done. And so I developed a stress pyramid, and it starts at the bottom with eating healthy, which is very important for health, very important, but it's not more important than exercise for stress management purposes. And exercise isn't more important than time management and organization, which isn't more important than relaxation and so forth, right on up. Loving relationships, a healthy viewpoint, a healthy attitude, positive attitude toward life. And finally, the spiritual integration at the very top of the pyramid that affects everything else in our lives. I put it at the very top.
And this is on the basis of...
It's on the basis of not only just my own experience, but on the basis of research. Dr. Dale Matthews at the University of Georgetown, also with the National Institute for Healthcare Research, the National Institute for Healthcare Research has researched over 200 or 300 now scientific research programs based on the relationship of spirituality and religious involvement in health, and has found a 10-to-1 correlation of positive to negative results. It's just overwhelming.
I noticed in the material that you gave me to prepare for today that you were the opening speaker for the 11th International Congress on Stress in Hawaii. And was it related to this? Is this what you talked about?
It was, Don. I'll tell you this story. Back in 1998, when we were involved, our church at Andrews University was involved in Net 98. I'd had a practice for several years during a major evangelistic campaign, reading through the book of Acts. Well, I'd done all this research. The seminar was just about to be published, and I was going through the book of Acts this time, and I was noticing things related to stress I had never seen before. And I wondered, could the whole Bible have this much in it about stress? So I started with Genesis 1:1. About a year and a half into that project, I got our annual newsletter. I'm a fellow of the American Institute of Stress. Okay. And I received our monthly newsletter, and it was calling for papers for the next International Congress on Stress to be held in Hawaii in December of this last year, 2000. And I had never read anything on the Bible and stress. And so I called them and found out if it was possible to submit an abstract, and they said yes, so I did, and on the Bible as a resource instrument for stress, and they accepted it. And finally, as we got closer to the time, found out that I was the opening speaker for that Congress on the Bible as a resource for stress management.
Amazing. So did you get stressed out about that invitation?
You know, I had so much wonderful help in putting that together and so much prayer behind me that I went into that thing so confident. You know, when we got there, it was just a lavish hotel, and we got we're going down to the opening banquet for that on Sunday evening. And we got in the elevator. The first people we met at this hotel in Hawaii, got in the elevator. On our way down the elevator, these people, we were exchanging names and why we were there. And I said, we're here with this Stress Congress. They said, we are too. And they said, what's your name? And I told them my name. And they said, Skip McCarty. They said, you're doing that presentation on the Bible as an instrument for stress management, or a resource for stress management. And I said, yes. He said, he teaches at a college. He teaches stress management at a college, and he said, we came for that very presentation.
Wow.
It happened to be the most attended session in the entire Congress.
Amazing. What a blessing that is.
It was incredible.
So what does the Bible have to say about stress?
Well, it's got a lot to say about it, and I've got several points. First of all, starting out, the Bible is, in the Bible, the word that's used for salvation is the same word that's used often for healing. and that's sozo, the Greek term sozo. In fact, sometimes, Don, in the very same verse, when it's referring to healing and salvation, and that same word is used, and it's used interchangeably. In other words, translators have to make a determination as to how it should be used.
Whether heal or save.
Whether heal or save. For instance, in James, when he says, call for the elders of the church, and they'll anoint you with oil, and the prayer of faith will save the sick. Some translations have save, other translations have heal. The word sozo. So there's a direct correlation in the Bible between spirituality and health.
So stress management really, or dealing with stress, is a healing type thing. But is there really a stress management program in the Bible per se, would you say?
You know, it was a surprise to me to find that the first stress management program given in the Bible was the only part of the Bible written by God himself. I'd gone through the Ten Commandments. First, I just started with Genesis 1:1, went all the way through Genesis, found some tremendous material. Was going through going through Exodus and went through the Ten Commandments and caught several things in the Ten Commandments. But then it just dawned on me one day: every one of the Ten Commandments is somehow calculated to prevent us from having too much stress or the wrong kind of stress and so forth. The Ten Commandments, and the one that is so beautiful is the Sabbath. The Sabbath gives us a pressure relief valve par excellence. It says when Friday night comes at sundown, you just turn everything off, and you can rejoice in the Lord. You can enjoy your family. You can remember what life's all about. Why are we working 6 days? What's the point of working those 6 days? The Sabbath is a gift of God in time for us to kind of rejuvenate.
Built-in stress release.
Perfectly.
So all of these Ten Commandments then have to do with relationships either with God or man, and they are meant to make sure we don't have stress in those.
Too much stress.
Too much.
Overload stress, and the wrong kind of stress, the damaging stress, the distress.
Okay, so if you break the commandments, then that would be sin. The Bible would call that probably. Isn't sin itself stressful?
In fact, let me just begin this list here. The Ten Commandments is the first program for stress management in the Bible, and the second is this very issue of sin and forgiveness. There's many places in the Bible where sin and forgiveness are related to stress and healing. And in Psalm 32, David prays, "When I kept silence, my bones wasted away. My strength was sapped." Talking about distress and physical illness and distress.
Isn't that when he was involved with someone he shouldn't have been involved with, someone else's wife?
That's right.
And he didn't want anybody to know about it?
And then in the very next breath, he says, "Then I acknowledged my sin to you and did not cover up my iniquity." In other words, he confessed his sin. And I will confess my transgression to the Lord, and you forgave the guilt of my sin. There's the pressure relief valve again. Forgiveness is the acknowledging our sin, getting out in the open, and then letting God just take that away through forgiveness.
Is this why some of these criminals and thieves, I mean, they've never been caught, but they come forward and they say, "I did it," and they're releasing their stress, do you suppose?
Undoubtedly. Yep, it's a huge pressure relief valve for them.
So the Ten Commandments and then sin and forgiveness. So the Bible doesn't want us to have any stress then. Would you agree with that?
It was interesting, after I got months into the study, it just began to dawn on me that the Bible really does not it doesn't set as a goal of life to get relief from stress. There's two kinds of material in the Bible. One kind of material is like the Ten Commandments. It protects us from stress that has no transcendent meaning, no transcendent purpose, no higher purpose to it.
Harmful stress.
Harmful stress, the distress, just purposeless stress, I call it. There's another whole set of information in the Bible that, in fact, calls us to live a life of purposeful stress. It calls us to sacrificially give of ourselves for other people, give of our time, give of our money to help other people. It calls us to live by certain values, even though living by those values may cause persecution, even martyrdom in some cases. And there's many evidences in the Bible that God's honor guards, so to speak, are people who are persecuted for standing up for what was right.
So Christ himself, when he came to this world, that wasn't really a stress reduction program for him.
That's right.
It was for us.
Life is not about simply stress reduction. It's about committing ourselves to the values that make the stress that we do have the transcendent stress that really counts for something from the biblical perspective.
Something purposeful or meaningful.
Exactly.
What about bad things, the stressful things that happen to us in life? Does the Bible address that, you know, why bad things happen to good people, or that's kind of the phrase?
That is one of the beautiful components of stress management in the Bible. It ascribes meaning to the trials that people have when they're attempting to live for God. In fact, it'll ascribe meaning to all kinds of trials. I love the story that Rick Rice tells about this sculpturer who has this block of marble. He tells it in his book, Why Bad Things Happen to God's People. He has this block of marble, and he's chiseling away everything that doesn't fit this masterpiece in his mind. And this beautiful sculpture. And when he gets into it, he finds a major flaw in the marble. And at that point, he kind of draws back, thinks about it for a couple of days, comes back to work on it. And when he gets done, he has a beautiful work of art, and it actually appears as though that flaw in the marble was designed into it originally. God can take any, even big mistakes that we've made in our lives, and He can change things. He can craft a mission for us, a purpose out of that actually makes it look like that it was beneficial, even though it may have been a foolish mistake we made. And we have so much evidence in the Bible of trials having meaning.
Like, give me an example.
Well, one of the greatest is in the story in the book of Genesis. Book of Genesis covers 2,500 years of history, and yet 1/4 of that book, 1/4 to 1/3 of that book is committed to one man. It's the story of Joseph.
Joseph.
Joseph is the stress management par excellence.
He had some real stress, didn't he?
Absolutely. He was committed to his values no matter how far he went down. Living by his values got him into more trouble. It created more stress for him. He stayed by his values, and at the end of the book, it's incredible when his brothers who had sold him into slavery, he meets his brothers, and he tells them he's forgiven them. And not to be distressed. He actually uses that terminology in the Bible. Don't be distressed, in the New International Version anyway, because God meant this for good. And when their father dies, they come back again and they beg him, please don't now take vengeance on us, because they think he's just doing it for Dad's sake. And he says that he begins to weep because he realizes that they never did really accept his forgiveness to start with. But then he says this to them. He says, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives.
Wow.
It's the Romans 8:28 principle that all things can work together for good to those who put their trust in God. It is so awesome.
So He can use the crack in the marble to make a beautiful masterpiece of your life.
Don, in 1979, I went through a very, very traumatic divorce. I thought I was going to die during that period of time. And out of that whole trauma, I thought my life was over. My career was over. Everything was over. Out of that, this seminar, this stress seminar, and the research that I've been doing on stress was born. And now it has been a blessing to thousands of people.
So what's the one man say? Scars could become stars, and you know they really seem like cliches, but it really is a truth when you start to understand what the Bible has to say about stress.
Powerfully.
And this was probably well received there at the conference as well.
It was the most well-attended session of the Congress. It was the first session, but never had more people than that first session. It had a tremendous response from people.
We've been talking with Dr. Skip McCarty. We've been talking about stress. Maybe in your life you've been experiencing some of the stressors that we've talked about at the beginning of this program. You're going to want to join us when we come back and continue to talk about what the Bible has to say about stress.
Have you found yourself wishing that you could shed a few pounds? Have you been on a diet for most of your life, but not found anything that will really keep the weight off? If you've answered yes to any of these questions, then we have a solution for you that works. Dr. Hans Deal and Dr. Eileen Luddington have written a marvelous booklet called Reversing Obesity Naturally, and we'd like to send it to you free of charge. Here's a medically sound approach successfully used by thousands who were able to eat more and lose weight permanently without feeling guilty or hungry through lifestyle medicine. Dr. Deal and Dr. Luddington have been featured on 3ABN, and in this booklet, they present a sensible approach to eating, nutrition, and lifestyle changes that can help you prevent heart disease, diabetes, and even cancer. Call or write today for your free copy of Reversing Obesity Naturally and you could be on your way to a healthier, happier you. It's absolutely free of charge, so call or write today.
Welcome back. We've been talking with Dr. Skip McCarty about stress, and we've talked about the Bible and stress today. It has real things to say about stress, and we're happy that you can share those insights you've gained over the last 20 years. And really, I've been really blessed by the seminar, Stress Beyond Coping. I hope it is available, and I'm sure that it is available for people to get a hold of. We were talking about these different stressors and how the Bible relates to them. We talked about the first stress program in the Bible, that being the Ten Commandments, avoiding those things which are harmful, and then having purposeful stress. But I notice here you have something about peace. Can we have peace?
That's right, Don. That's the next one on the list is the Bible promises peace in the midst of stress. In other words, never guarantees we won't have stress. In fact, it guarantees you will have stress. Paul said that it's through many tribulations we must enter the kingdom of God. So maybe if you're not a Christian, maybe you can live a stress-free life. I don't know. I doubt it, because there's no peace, Isaiah said, to the wicked. But for sure, if you're a Christian, you're going to have some stress and distress even. And yet, you can have peace in the midst of that stress. The Bible promises peace, perfect peace, whose mind is stayed upon Him. And I had a medical student who came to me a few months ago he had been living with somebody, he wasn't a Christian, been living with somebody for a period of time, and then that person moved out on him, and he just went to pieces. He had to take time off of medical school. In fact, he was in rotations by then. And his brother brought him to talk to me because I would do some work with stress. And he talked to me for a couple of hours, and then he'd had a religious background as a child, but I gave him a copy of the Bible. We talked a little bit about some of the issues involved in what he was going through. I gave him a copy of the Bible and asked him to begin to read in the book of Matthew. He came back a couple of weeks later and had been reading, he read already 20-some chapters in the book of Matthew, and he said, nothing has done for me. Nothing has done for me what that has. He says, he was still struggling, but he said, that has brought a deeper peace than anything I've ever known.
Do you find that just reading the Scriptures brings peace?
You know what, Don? I am absolutely convinced now, after the research I've done on the Bible as a resource for stress management, starting with the book of Genesis and just working through verse by verse, I don't care where somebody starts reading anymore. It doesn't matter. They're going to find something to help them with stress. It's everywhere. It's in the book of Leviticus.
Just
everywhere.
Just reading.
Just read the Bible. You're going to get help. And that's what this man was doing. You know, the Apostle Paul, talking about peace in the midst of stress, the Apostle Paul was persecuted over and over and over. He was flogged. We know how awful flogging was. He was stoned. He was caned. He was shipwrecked. All those things happened, and yet listen to what he wrote. Listen to what he wrote here in the book of Philippians. He said, I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need. I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do everything through Him who gives me strength. Peace. He found that peace. He found it.
Doesn't matter what you do or don't do.
Or what's happening to you.
Yeah.
It's not dependent on what's happening to you.
You know, I've often thought about Paul, what if he hadn't gotten all these problems? He wouldn't have had time to write these things, And so through his stress, we have the keys for success, you could say.
Yep.
Amazing. Okay, besides peace then, we've looked at several different things. You teach that social relationships are important as well. Talk about that a bit.
Well, the Bible teaches that. The Bible has always brought believers into communities. In Israel, it was the Old Testament. And even when somebody who wasn't a Jew was converted to the God of the Bible, they were to become part of that community, part of the community of faith. In the New Testament, it's the church. And listen to how the book of Acts, in Acts chapter 2, describes the church and what a supporting group it was. By the way, a lot of research today, an amazing amount of research today showing that social relationships are one of the greatest benefits and supports for stress. Listen to this. All the believers were together and had everything in common. This is from Acts chapter 2. Selling their possessions and goods, they gave to anyone as he had need. Talk about a community. If you had stress, people were there for you. They helped you. The Apostle Paul said that the church is like a body. If one member suffers, the whole body suffers with it. It's like the human body. I injure my finger, my body marshals to save my finger and heal my finger. It's like that in a community. I've experienced that for myself.
Do you think the churches today, by and large, have that? They offer that kind of support. Have you ever experienced it?
Well, not to the same degree. We don't offer that support to the same degree that early Christians did. We don't sell everything we have, and everybody, if they have anything, we don't do that. But let me tell you a story. When I was going through, after I was remarried by this time, and my wife and I, we blended 6 children. They did better than we did. We were having real struggles there for a while. And I remember one Sabbath, I was sitting out in my car. It was up at the St. Joseph Church there near Andrews. I was half-time pastor at Andrews, half-time pastor at St. Joe, so that Andrews, our university church there, could have a missionary community. I was sitting out in my car there at St. Joseph, trying to figure out which of these 2 sermons I had I'd preached before was least inappropriate to be preaching that day. I had had such a stressful week. It was such a difficult week. I'd never had anything quite like that. I went into the pulpit that day still not knowing, when I got up to speak, which sermon I was going to take. And I actually heard myself describing a little bit about the week I had, how difficult it was. And I really did not have something. I wasn't going to fool them into thinking I really had something for them today. And I would just pray for them, and I sat down. And no sermon, no word from God or anything. And the head deacon stood up, and he said, "Folks, I think we ought to pray for our pastor." And that church formed a circle all the way around that church. They took my family. We all held hands all the way around the outskirts of the church. They prayed for us. And then everybody went to the potluck. We went to the potluck. They never mentioned that. That pastored that church for several years after that. They never mentioned that incident again. They were such a healing force. I found all the way through the most difficult times of my life, the church has been a tremendous resource for healing and help.
I can almost imagine the conversation on the way home, or maybe the lack of conversation, but just the healing that went on.
Tremendous. Powerful.
So, social relationships, having peace. You also believe that worship is a key component, and that, of course, takes place, at least in some sense, in a church setting.
Worship. This was one of the surprises to me in my research in the Bible and stress management. I got a large way through the Bible before I realized the power of worship. I was reading through the Psalms. Worship was a tremendous stress reliever for the believers in the times of the Bible. It's like alcohol is an escape for people, and drugs can be an escape for people to get them out of their problems for a little while. Then they got to come back to them again. But in worship, and many of the Psalms, by the way, they start with distress. People are complaining, and they're in great distress. You can tell that when you begin to read the Psalms. But what happened in worship was they were lifting their distress up before God. They were reminded they were in the presence of the God, the creator of the universe, and they seemed drawn up into his presence. And suddenly they were in the presence of one who made the universe, and their problems in his presence seemed so insignificant. When they came out of that experience of worship again, and then often in those Psalms, they break into praise. Before the Psalm's over, they break into praise, and they come back again, rather than coming back like off a hangover or something, like if you had an escape with alcohol. Worship is, in a sense, an escape from deep, deep trouble and distress, but then you come back empowered. You come back assured that God is on the throne, and he can take care of these things. Another thing about worship is that the Bible portrays God as one who suffers with us. Jesus himself, when he came here, suffered to the ultimate for us. And in Psalm 53, I'll never forget, when I went to Psalm 53, I was clipping through like 1 or 2 chapters a day in my research, and when I got to Psalm 53, it just stopped me in my tracks, because here was this suffering God, this suffering servant that just towered, and you realize that...
You mean Isaiah 53?
Isaiah 53, excuse me.
Okay.
Isaiah 53. And here is a suffering servant just towering up above. We realize that we have not suffered as much as our God. Our God understands us. He suffered with us. He has all the resources to help us through whatever we're going through.
So worship then, transcendent worship that just draws you above.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
What a responsibility for those leading worship as well. But and of course the Lord wants to do that. What about the Bible's teaching about the soon return of Jesus?
That is an awesome stress reliever. In fact, looking forward to something at the end of something will help you go through a very distressful period of time. When we were backpacking with my kids, and they had a hard time along the trail. I would describe the meal we're going to have, the marshmallow roast we're going to have at the end of the trail, the pudding cups and the things we're going to be eating at the end of the day when we had our tent pitched and we were around the campfire. And that just helped us. It gave us the extra energy we needed to go on. In the Bible, looking forward to the second coming of Jesus Christ has been the great hope. It's called the blessed hope in the Bible, and it is for the believer. It just gives them strength and motivation to go on and to go into the future.
We have about 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes left. What would you say if you had just to give a single text from the Bible? What text would it be that would help us with stress management?
Don, there is one. It's Isaiah 26:3.
Okay.
It is so awesome. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed upon thee, because he trusts in thee.
Wow, that's a beautiful promise.
Oh, I'll tell you what, when you focus on that, and focusing on God and just resting in God, realizing He's the great creator, He's the one who suffered more than we have, He's our great resource, it is just absolutely powerful. And one other I would add to that, it's one that, it comes from both Old Testament and New Testament. It occurs in the Old Testament, it's quoted again in the New Testament in Peter, cast all your anxiety, in the New International Version, cast all your anxiety on Him because He cares for you.
Wow.
And let me tell you a story.
Beautiful.
I was at church going up to my office through the long sanctuary at the Pioneer Memorial Church one day, and I was busy, I was tense, I had so many things on my agenda, I didn't know how I was going to get through it all. I was a little short with people as I was going through the office picking up my mail, and
I'm sure no one watching has ever had that kind of a day.
it was quite a day. I walked into the sanctuary, and as I walked in, I heard this beautiful, beautiful child's voice. It was Olivia Knott, the daughter of Esther Knott, who was up in the balcony underneath the stained glass window of Christ carrying a little lamb with the parent sheep looking up at Christ carrying this lamb so gently. And Olivia Knott was singing this song, I cast all my care upon you.
Wow.
I lay all of my burdens down at your feet. She was singing it. It just was so pure and
just out of the
powerful.
blue, she was up there
She
by
was up there
herself.
singing it. I walked right into that. And suddenly, my stress just totally drained out of me. Just instantly drained out of me. And I just felt at peace. By the time I got to the back of that sanctuary, I was at peace. I was ready for the day. It just brought everything back into perspective. God is so powerful, and the Bible is such a rich resource for managing stress.
Indeed it is. Boy, thank you so much for sharing with us. These have been very helpful to me personally. And I know that you that have been watching, I hope that you have found some real keys when we look at God's Word for surviving, and really like your seminar is entitled, moving beyond just coping with stress, thriving as a result of these concepts. And we hope that as a result of today's program, you have health that lasts for a lifetime.